We often hear about the wealth of ancient Egypt, the gold, the temples, and the feasts of the pharaohs. But what about the common people? The farmers, the laborers, and the workers building the pyramids in the scorching heat. Their food was cheap, simple, and prepared from whatever they could grow or gather. There were no fancy spices, no big meat meals, just basic food that kept them alive through long and hard days. So what exactly did they eat to stay alive? Let's take a look at 10 cheap meals that helped ancient Egyptian farmers get through their daily hard lives. Peasants in ancient Egypt did not eat like pharaohs. Their meals were basic, cheap, and prepared to withstand the heat and hard labor. Their diet primarily consisted of grains, bread, dried fish, and vegetables. It was not about flavor. It was about surviving throughout the day. Without further delay, let's dive into these cheap meals, and the first one on the list is barley bread and date paste. 1. Barley bread and date paste. For ancient Egyptian peasants, barley bread was the heart of every meal. It was cheap, filling, and simple to make, even in large quantities. Barley was more common than wheat, particularly among the poor. The reason? It was easy to grow even in dry or salty soils. This made it readily available for the poor. To prepare the bread, they used stone tools to grind barley into flour, combined it with water, and allowed it to rise on its own. After that, it was cooked in clay ovens or on heated stones. The result was a dense, chewy flatbread, frequently dark and coarse, with bits of husk remaining within. But sometimes bread alone could be dry and hard to eat. That's when date paste came to the rescue. Mashing soft dates made the date paste into a dense and sticky mixture. It added sweetness and energy to the meal. Dates were simple to store and full of natural sugars, ideal for workers who needed quick energy. This basic duo, barley bread paired with date paste, was affordable, nourishing, and sufficient to sustain peasants throughout the entire day. But when the farmers needed something warm and comforting, they turned to a different kind of comfort food, lentil stew with onions. 2. Lentil stew with onions. For peasants seeking a hearty, warm meal after long hours in the fields, lentil stew was a preferred choice. Lentils were cheap, simple to store, and loaded with protein. That's why they were considered a crucial plant-derived source of strength for the working class. The stew was basic. Lentils cooked in water with diced onions, with a touch of garlic or leek if available. The ingredients were gently cooked over a flame in ceramic vessels until tender and thick. No seasonings, no fat. Only natural flavors that satisfied hunger and provided essential energy. Lentils were also beneficial, as they were cultivated locally near the Nile, frequently alongside various grains and vegetables. Even with a bad harvest, lentils were typically reliable. It was not a fancy meal, but it was warm, filling, and enough to keep you alive. If lentils were unavailable, there was always a simple alternative: a mashed dish made from one of Egypt's oldest crops. 3. Fava beans. Fava beans, commonly referred to as broad beans, served as a fundamental crop in ancient Egypt. They were cheap, filling, and high in protein. They were often eaten mashed into a creamy dish, quite similar to what is recognized today as full medamemes in modern Egyptian cuisine. To make it, peasants would cook the beans until tender, and then mash them with some water to create a thick mixture. If they could get garlic, leeks, or a sprinkle of salt, they'd mix it in for taste. But even simple fava bean mash provided them with the energy required to continue working throughout the day. Beans were perfect because they stored well and did not spoil easily. In periods of food scarcity or extended work periods, a pot of fava mash could nourish a whole family. It was not fancy, but it filled the stomach. But when the heat became intolerable and solid food seemed too heavy, peasants turned to something softer, cooler, and somewhat unusual. 4th, beer porridge. Yes, you heard that right. Beer porridge. In ancient Egypt, beer was not simply for drinking. It was an affordable, common source of food, particularly for the poor. Whenever they required something smooth, chilled, and easy to swallow, they turned their remaining beer into a type of porridge. This porridge was created by breaking old barley bread into a bowl or pot and soaking it in fermented beer. The blend would become thicker as the bread soaked up the liquid, resulting in a soft, tangy porridge. It was commonly consumed cold and provided a quick boost of calories, hydration, and even a mild buzz. In ancient Egypt, beer had low alcohol content, but was high in nutrients. It was prepared with grains, water, and occasionally dates, making it more like a liquid meal rather than a modern beverage. For peasants who had little time and even fewer food options, beer porridge was an unusual yet practical solution. For those fortunate enough to cultivate some vegetables, the next meal brought a spicy twist: leek and garlic spread on flatbread. 5. Flatbread with leek and garlic spread. In ancient Egypt, leeks and garlic served not only as flavor enhancers, but also provided medicine, energy, and comfort. For farmers, these aromatic plants were easy to cultivate and frequently used to stretch simple dishes. One popular option was a coarse mixture created by mashing leeks and garlic into a paste with some salt and water. This blend would then be spread onto flatbread, adding an intense, tangy flavor to a completely bland meal. Flatbread was produced from barley or emmer flour, flattened thin, and cooked on heated stones. On its own, it was bland and unappetizing. But with a touch of garlic leek paste, it transformed into something far more fulfilling, particularly after an exhausting day of physical labor. Leeks and garlic were believed to provide strength, and numerous farmers consumed them regularly to maintain their energy levels. This quick meal delivered a burst of flavor, even in the absence of meat or spices. But when protein was necessary and meat was unavailable, peasants relied on the Nile's gift. 6. Dried fish. For ancient Egyptian peasants, meat was a luxury, but fish from the Nile was a more affordable protein source. But there was one thing: fresh fish spoiled quickly. Therefore, it was sun-dried or smoked over fire to preserve it for weeks. For many poor families, dried fish served as their primary source of animal protein. These fish, typically small varieties such as perch or catfish, were caught in baskets or nets, then cleaned and dried until they became leathery. They were frequently consumed alongside emmer wheat, a hearty grain similar to barley but with a slightly nuttier taste. Emmer was prepared as porridge or baked into dense, coarse bread. Combined with pieces of dried fish, it resulted in a chewy, salty, and satisfying meal. It wasn't luxurious, but it provided the energy required for lengthy hours of agriculture or construction work. This dish showed how peasants relied on every aspect of the river for their survival. However, when fish were not accessible, they returned to the land, preparing any greens they could collect, such as cabbage and turnip greens. 7. Cabbage and turnip greens. When grain supplies were low or fish became difficult to catch, ancient Egyptian farmers sought refuge in the garden or even the wild. Cabbage and turnip greens were among the simplest and most affordable vegetables to cultivate. Resilient and rapidly growing, they could flourish in small areas of land close to the Nile or at the borders of fields. These greens were commonly boiled or simmered in water with a touch of salt. Sometimes crushed garlic or leeks were included to enhance the flavor. The result was a mild, slightly bitter meal that could be enjoyed alone or with a slice of bread. While low in calories, cabbage and turnip greens were rich in nutrients, particularly crucial for workers who had a limited diet. Since they needed little land or maintenance, even the poorest families were able to cultivate them. Simple and humble, this dish served as a reminder that living didn't have to be fancy. But when they craved something with extra flavor and crunch, peasants looked to the marshes for an unexpected delight. 8. Roasted lotus root. The marshy banks of the Nile were not only for fishing, they were also full of edible plants. One of the most valued was lotus root, the dense, carbohydrate-rich stem of the lotus flower. While the flower itself was often seen in artwork and religious symbols, the root was a star on the peasant's dining table. Lotus root was taken out of muddy water, washed and cut into circles. It possessed a crispy texture and a gentle, somewhat sweet flavor. Peasants would cook it over an open flame or simmer it with herbs they had, such as dill, coriander, or dried mint, if available. It was a seasonal delight, more common during the warmer months, and provided diversity in a diet that frequently repeated the same components. Lotus root offered energy and moisture, making it ideal for farmers working in the sun. For peasants, it was a rare meal that felt a little special. However, at festivals or harvest festivities, they opted for something sweet and simple. 9. Fig cakes with honey drizzle. Life was difficult for Egyptian farmers, but that didn't mean it was miserable. During festivals, harvests, or religious occasions, even families with little means discovered ways to enjoy some sweetness, and fig cakes were a beloved treat. Figs were among the most common fruits in ancient Egypt. They grew well in the heat, dried quickly, and remained fresh for an extended period without decay. Farmers would crush dried figs into a dense, sticky mixture and shape them into tiny cakes or spheres. If they were lucky to have some flour, the cakes could be baked or sun-dried. But do you know what was the true delight? A drizzle of honey. A single spoonful can elevate a simple fig cake to a festive treat. These easy sweets represented more than just nourishment. They provided a break from everyday life, a moment of celebration. But during the most challenging moments, when food was scarce, peasants turned to one final survival meal. 10. Bread, water, and salt. In periods of great difficulty, such as droughts, poor harvests, or food scarcity, peasants in ancient Egypt were forced to survive on the essentials only. One of the easiest and cheapest survival meals was crumbled bread combined with water and a pinch of salt. Barley or emmer bread would be crushed into tiny pieces and soaked in water until it became a soft paste. A small amount of salt, if available, was mixed in to enhance the flavor. This dish provided little nutritional value or energy, but it was better than going hungry. For many poor families, this type of meal helped them in enduring difficult times until the next harvest arrived. It was harsh, but it kept people alive. In the world of ancient Egyptian farmers, the primary goal was to survive. These meals may appear basic or even harsh, but they tell the story of survival. Ancient Egyptian farmers survived not through luxury, but through resourcefulness. From bread and beans to figs and fish, every bite mattered. Like this journey into ancient Egyptian farmers' dining? Do tell us in the comments. Also, share and subscribe for more ancient stories.